The folding of the Alliance of American Football came as a shock to just about everyone. What was seen just weeks before as a very promising developmental league with players that many had training camp crushes on and were hoping that would stick onto their team's favourite roster, all battling it out for that chance in the spotlight once more, had suddenly vanished in the click of a finger in the most unconventional and disrespectful way possible to its players. However, it didn't take long for NFL teams and scouts who had spent the last few months scouting the talent pool from the likes of Johnny Manziel to Trent Richardson to start poaching players from these 8 former franchises. The Philadelphia Eagles were no exception as they dove their hand into the goodie bag and pulled out 3 NFL caliber players who will be vying for roster spots next training camp. But who are these players and what can we expect from them? Here's all you need to know. We're going to start things off with the quarterback position, and Luis Perez was the first one to get a tryout with the Eagles shortly after the league folded. At 6'3", 222 pounds, it's not really hard to see why either. Perez possesses a solid frame and the height that Peterson would typically look for in his signal caller, but the 24-year-old has a very interesting history. Perez went undrafted out of Texas A&M Commerce last season and spent that summer with the LA Rams, of course, learning under Jared Goff and Sean McVay, which will immediately raise a few eyebrows. Prior to his lone season at A&M Commerce, he played JUCO football at Southwestern College in California, where he was awarded the Harlan Hill Trophy in 2017, labeling him the best football player in NCAA Division II. However, Perez is probably best known for his most recent stint with the Birmingham Iron, or Birmingham Iron as I'm told, in the Alliance of American Football, but he didn't exactly set the league on fire. In fact, he was even benched at one stage and ended up completing just 52.3% of his passes for a total of 1,465 yards, 5 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and a measly 65.9 passer rating. At this point, he is purely a developmental quarterback, and Perez would slot in behind Nate Sudfeld and Carson Wentz in a clear hierarchy to compete for a quarterback 3 spot. He could well be this year's Joe Callahan or the Dane-trained Dane Evans, depending on how far you view his talent, but he does have plenty of upside at just 24 years old, and the interesting history to come from an NCAA Division II school. He's impressed NFL scouts in the first few weeks of the AAF, and I don't think the Eagles, who have got one of the strongest quarterback coaching trees in the NFL, would take a chance on Perez if they didn't genuinely see something in him, and I think Sean McVay could kind of say the same, given his reputation as a quarterback whisperer. The nice thing about this signing, as aforementioned, is that it's not an immediate competition to Nate Sudfeld, or so we think. It sets Nate Sudfeld up, who was tendered earlier this offseason, as a direct backup to Carson Wentz, but that does not mean this team won't go out and draft a quarterback. We could see someone like Easton Stick, we could see someone like Brett Rypien brought in during the course of the latter rounds of the NFL draft to compete for that QB3 spot and let the other one potentially develop on the practice squad if all the dominoes fall in the right way. Either way, Perez is an intriguing prospect who has plenty of upside, youth on his side, and experience at a professional league outside of college. So the question is now what we're going to see, does that level of talent equal or surpass what we've seen at college, and can Perez hang it with a guy like Nate Sudfeld or like whoever will be battling for QB3? The second name on this list should be familiar to Eagles fans everywhere, and that is wide receiver Greg Ward Jr. The former Houston quarterback transitioned to wide receiver after going undrafted and even drawing comparisons to Lamar Jackson at the time, and would spend the next 2 years on the edge of making the Eagles' 53-man roster, showing some strong development during both preseasons with the team. But after narrowly missing the cut for 2 seasons in a row, Greg Ward Jr. decided to take his talents to the Alliance of American Football and the San Antonio Commanders. He didn't necessarily blow the league up during the league's short life, but he did record 22 receptions for 214 yards, and perhaps more importantly to the Eagles, he showed an ability as a returner, bringing back 9 punts for 135 yards and actually led the league with an average of 15 yards per return. And if we think of the Eagles' return game, where, let's be honest, Darren Sproles may not be around next season, we don't know the value in Corey Clement and Wendell Smallwood, or if one of the underrated wide receivers like Shelton Gibson or Mac Hollins can step up. The Eagles need some assurances there. Sure, Deshaun Jackson will now be fielding punts and kicks, but how reliable can he be? They won't want to burn out those tyres all too quickly. So Greg Ward Jr. could be finding a nice little niche there in Philadelphia. Outside of that, at 5'10", 182 192 pounds, a 4.58 40-yard dash time. He's not going to be the biggest guy on the field. However, after Nelson Agholor's 9 million cap hit, it could be safe to say the Eagles are looking at least for an insurance policy inside the slot. Whether or not that's for this season, whether or not that's after Nelson Agholor's 2019 campaign, if Greg Ward Jr. can have a third consecutive strong preseason, where in the last two he's combined for 92 total receiving yards, why can't he be the eventual successor to Nelson Agholor's throne? At 23 years old, Ward is still extremely young and could well be a viable option to compete for a spot lower down the roster this year, let alone elevate into a much larger one in the years beyond. In fact, his most recent experience in the Alliance of American Football may only propel his chances, given the Eagles have already liked what they've seen. Perhaps the player with the most intrigue surrounding their name, though, is 30-year-old veteran Charles Johnson, and this is a huge win for the Philadelphia Eagles. Johnson was arguably the Alliance's most explosive receiver during its short reign. Playing for the Orlando Apollos, Johnson led the league with 45 receptions and 687 receiving yards. His 5 touchdown catches also ranked him second in the league. Not only that, but Johnson's name's probably ringing a few bells right now, and that's because he's got a credible NFL resume. Before losing a training camp battle with the New York Jets in 2018 and landing in the AAF, the former 7th round selection of Green Bay was most prominently known for his 2014 breakout in Minnesota, where he snagged 2 touchdown passes and 475 receiving yards. He stayed with the Vikings for 3 years, but the injury bug started to bite, and bite hard. He was with the Jets, as I mentioned, in 2018, but was cut before the start of the season. In 2016, he was named the starting wideout for Minnesota alongside the one and only Stephon Diggs, but he started out slow, catching just 3 passes for 20 yards over his first few games. A 70-yard burst against the Jets 1 week later was promising, but not enough to build a consistently reliable case, especially when you consider the emergence of Adam Thielen alongside him. After bouncing to several other teams, Johnson took a shot at the Alliance of American Football, where, as we now know, he stole the show. He's 6'2", 216 pounds, but is undoubtedly playing at a level high enough to compete at the NFL level. Marcus Wheaton and Ruben Randall are 2 former veterans who have tried out and failed to make the Eagles roster, but why can't Johnson just change that tune? As an underdog throughout his entire career, a 7th round pick that has gone from team to team, battling knee injury after setback, to finally explode in the Alliance of American Football, to prove that he's still got what it takes at age 30 to run with players who could well be playing in the NFL. Why can't he have one more shot to make this roster? And as we know, the long-term picture at receiver for the Eagles isn't exactly the most prominent. If they can get an extra special teams guy or find another red zone weapon, then why can't they give Charles Johnson a shot? This is a tremendous grab because it's immediate production. It's not someone that is a developmental guy. They know what they see in Johnson. He's shown it throughout his NFL career. The problem has been staying on the field. So now the question becomes, will Charles Johnson continue to break the mold, continue to change his stars, and make this Philadelphia Eagles roster? Who of the 3 AAF players do you want to see break onto this Eagles roster before the 2019 season? Let me know down below in the comments. And if you enjoyed this sort of video, guys, please leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here. We want to build the biggest and the best sports community for Philadelphia fans on YouTube and beyond. You can follow myself, Liam Jenkins, on Twitter at LiamJenkins21 or at PhiladelphiaSN. And don't forget, you get your daily dose of Philadelphia sports coverage 24/7 at PhillySportsNetwork.com.